Okay, good evening and welcome back once again to the We Are Marshall podcast. My name is Stephen Marshall and this is my co-host Bill McIntyre. We're
Greetings.
just two guys discussing the issues of the day, laying out the facts of those issues and giving you our opinion and view on those issues. We would also love it here at the We Are Marshall podcast if you would like and share all of our episodes around your social media. We can be found on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Locals, X, Truth Social, and Rumble. Rumble is where we populate our full channel with season 1 and 2 of all of our episodes. Download the free app Rumble and search the We Are Marshall podcast. Then subscribe and follow to get notification of new episodes and other endeavors by Bill and I. Check out our episodes on all of these social media sites and share them to help us grow. We'd also love it if you would check out our website at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com. You can see a number of things Bill and I are working on the website. If you go to Bill's bio, you can click on a link to all his blog posts and check out Vela on Amazon, where Bill also writes episodic short stories for your viewing. Check out my two books currently for sale on Amazon. The first one is The Unforeseen Enemy, and the second one now is The Perception Therapist. Both are available now. Also, check out our sponsors, Local Prints New Hampshire. You can go to our website again at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com and click on the link to Local Prints New Hampshire on the top left. They are a full-scale screen printing company in Hampstead, New Hampshire, and they are available for domestic and international printing. Go support them as they support us. Also, check out our large sponsor, MateConnector.com, a large dating website, just like all the other big dating websites out there with all the features that the big players have in the dating sphere. But Mate Connector is much more inexpensive than any of them. If you have any questions or issues, you can reach us both at the following emails. Bill can be reached at bill@wearemarshallpodcast.com, and myself, I can be reached at steve@wearemarshallpodcast.com. We have a lot to cover as usual, so let us jump right into the issues of the day. And the first one the theme for mine today is free speech and kind of where it's going and what's transpiring in that realm of free speech. And the first story that I want to get into, it's very important because this business controls probably the most important aspect of the internet as we know it, and that's Google. So a report just come out, and it found that Google interfered in U.S. elections to help Democrats 41 times since 2008. So let's get right into this story. And Google has been putting its thumb on the scale to help Democratic candidates win the presidency in the last 4 election cycles during which it censored Republicans, according to a right-leaning media watchdog. The Media Research Center published a report alleging 41 instances of election interference by the search engine since 2008. The MRC published a report accusing Google of having utilized its power to help push to electoral victory the most liberal candidates while targeting their opponents for censorship. The report comes weeks after all sides conducted an analysis which found that news aggregator Google News skewed even more off the charts in 2023. Google has also come under fire after its Gemini AI image generator produced woke-inspired and historically inaccurate images such as Black Vikings, female Pope, and Native Americans among the founding fathers.
You left out Asian Revolutionary War heroes.
Exactly. So Google has denied the claims made by MRC, of course. But in 2008, MRC alleged that Google threw its support behind then Senator Barack Obama, a Democrat from Illinois at the time, as he faced off against Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination. According to the MRC report, Google targeted support for Hillary Clinton for censorship by suspending the accounts of writers who wrote blogs critical of Obama during his primary race against Clinton. 4 years later, Google, which once again favored Obama over Mitt Romney, refused to correct a Google bomb that smeared GOP primary candidate Rick Santorum. According to the report, the MRC study cited data from Dr. Robert Epstein, who told Congress that Google's search algorithm shifted at least 2.5 million votes to Clinton in her failed race against the eventual winner, Donald Trump. Epstein claimed to have conducted dozens of controlled experiments that uncovered the impact of Google's bias, but a source close to the company pushed back, citing flaws in Epstein's methodology, which produced claims that were widely debunked. In 2020, Google targeted Tulsi Gabbard, the Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii who was running for the party's nomination for president, by disabling Gabbard's ads account just as she became the most searched candidate following the first Democratic Party primary debate, the MRC alleged. A source close to Google refuted the claim, saying that the company's automated systems flagged unusual activity due to large spending changes in an effort to prevent fraud. The matter was resolved in 6 hours. But just to go back over that, a source close to Google refutes the claim. But then they say the matter was resolved within 6 hours. So basically, they're gaslighting. They just lied.
They refuted a claim that never happened, you mean?
Exactly. Thank you very much. Okay. So it definitively happened because they're saying that the matter was resolved within 6 hours. According to the source, who noted that Gabbard's subsequent lawsuit against the company was dismissed, the nonprofit went on to accuse Google of having suppressed news sources critical of Joe Biden. The MRC also alleged that Google's left-leaning bias impacted the 2022 Georgia Senate race between former football great Republican Herschel Walker and the eventual winner, the Democrat Raphael Warnock. According to the report, Google's search results favored the incumbent Warnock in the swing precinct where greater proportions of undecided voters likely reside. A source close to Google told the Post that third parties who have looked at our results and found no evidence to support claims of political bias. There's absolutely nothing new here, just a recycled list of baseless, inaccurate complaints that have been debunked by third parties and many that failed in the courts, a Google spokesperson told the Post. Politicians on the left have a long history of making similar claims too, the company rep said, adding, "We have a clear business incentive to keep everyone using our products, so we have no desire to make them biased or inaccurate and have safeguards in place to ensure this." Let's ask Gemini if that's true. Have been particularly successful in using our platforms to spread their message to a wide audience. Now, the bottom line, if you look at this story on this and you read it, okay, the headline is damning. You read it, they try to debunk everything, but you go look at the statistical data and the actual searches. If you searched for certain things, it was way down pages where most people don't even go past the 2 pages. Okay? They just said, and I need to reiterate this again, they just said that it was that they fixed it in 6 hours, but it never happened. So if you got a company that's looking you in the face and say, "Oh, it didn't happen, but we did fix it 6 hours," how can you believe anything they say? And the scary thing is Google is so important to the internet the way it is right now. It is pretty much the predominant search engine that most people use. So any information that's being pulled back should be valid. It should not suppress anything, because then it's only showing you what Google wants you to believe and what Google wants you to see for information. That is not freedom of speech, okay? That is definitively suppressing lots of things, and they need to be held accountable for this. I think there needs to be some way that they need to expose this algorithm to someone in Congress so that they can start looking at this company. I'm not a big person with government into company, but Google's data collection is astronomical, and people need to pay attention to this. What do you think of this, Bill? This is pretty much a suppression of free speech.
It is absolutely a suppression of free speech, Steve. And I'm glad you brought this up, because if we were going to summarize up in one subject, the reason we even started doing this project. Now, people, we're really trying to build this thing. We put a lot of time into this, okay, because we think it's important. This is the kind of story that we want people to understand, okay? Google has the name. It has the reputation, the understanding that if you look up what they say, the answer you're going to find on Google is almost 100%. You can stand in front of a congressional hearing and say it because you're guaranteeing it's right, okay? And it's not, okay? They use search engine optimization to drive down important information. That's manipulation, okay? And then when it comes to Gemini, I just punched into Gemini actually about the story, and I asked it, is Google suppressing information that says it's 5:45 p.m. So it works well. I know that was bad. I'm sorry. I don't get a clap for that one, Steve. Jeez. Yeah, I know.
That would missed it a little bit. If you had really done it and that's what happened, all right, then it would be funny.
Yeah, I guess I'm not remotely funny. Having said that, I mean, look at this. Okay, like I said, people if they were at a party or two guys talking and say, "Hey, what's the answer to this question?" Look it up on Google. Oh, it's definitely this, right? Okay, that's out the window. Free speech is under fire more than ever right now. Okay, and this should not be the first of these stories. It's a very big topic right now about Facebook and other media outlets suppressing, outright censoring, and that word should not be changed. It is censoring. It is giving people what you want them to read. That's censorship. It's borderlines on propaganda. Okay, the First Amendment is a matter of checks and balances, and and now we find out that elections have been affected by it. I think many people suspected this, but now they actually know it. But you look at the story with Tulsi Gabbard.
Google's still denying the report, though, just so you know.
Of course. Yeah, of course. But that report, if I'm not mistaken, is 19 pages long.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive report, and they're just going to turn to like bias, okay? There's bias everywhere. It was a Republican or GOP-led media group that did it, okay? All right, they're looking for something because they want to find something definitively, and they did back it up with evidence. So I don't know what to say to Google and anybody that refutes it just because of the bias of the GOP on this particular subject.
Well, it's food for thought. Okay, every story it gets presented, it gets analyzed, and the validity is established. You know, I mean, this is what we're looking at. But this is something that people need to pay attention to. They need to ask themselves every day: am I being manipulated? And you have to have the ability to look at that, you know, a little bit critically and say, wait a minute, I need to make sure that I'm digesting and learning, not just regurgitating falsehoods. And this story really is scary, even though the fact that it was faced with picking Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, and it was two Democrats, and it had to pick which Democrat they wanted to favor. I found that interesting. And then the other one, Tulsi. I know why Tulsi got censored, because she doesn't fit the narrative. She's a fairly moderate Democrat. They didn't want her getting anywhere.
But she does. She's against the progressives of the Democratic Party. She is a moderate. You're right.
Yeah,
and they don't want that.
Converting to being Republican, by the way.
Yeah. So let's be real. Right now, the Democratic Party is run by progressives, and she's not one of them. Therefore, no way. So that's the problem with the Democratic Party right now, unfortunately. And we were all hoodwinked in believing that Joe Biden was a moderate, and we'd be okay with someone in the center of things, which would have been fine with me. But he completely shattered that belief.
Another Bill Clinton would have been acceptable to me. I've railed against this administration as much as anybody. And my new liberal female friend, I had a lot of fun with her. But, you know, we both said the same thing. You know, we were looking at what this administration really is, and we're both looking for another Bill Clinton, a guy who can reach across the aisle, who can get things done regardless of what party you belong to, because it's supposed to be that a good idea is a good idea, not a Democrat idea or a Republican idea. And that seems to be lost also. So this is an important story, Steve. Pound it, man. Shout it from the rooftops. This is a great story.
Well, I mean, Bill Clinton did pound it in. He was reaching under his desk, so who knows, man.
Give the man a cigar, will you?
But anyway, we're going to move on. That's a good subject. Pay attention. I got another story that's coming up down the road that's going to be very similar to that, but it's going to tie together a free speech thing that I see going on. And the reason I really did this today is I was on Facebook, and one of my friends was having a dialogue, and someone called Trump a dictator, okay? It was a person that was a liberal, and I couldn't believe it because, you know, Trump says some crazy stuff. We can't deny that.
Does. Absolutely.
But he does not, his actions do not show that he's a dictator. But what I said to this person is your president, Joe Biden, does show signs of dictatorship, and that's what I'm covering today. But with that being said,
absolutely,
we're gonna move on to another subject that Mr. Biden is heavily entrenched in that doesn't look good. We'll hand it over to you here, Bill, at the We Are Marshall podcast to go with your first topic of the evening. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. In the shameless plug department, I want to announce that on my Kindle Vella account, I've released 4 episodes of something I've been working on. It's unfortunately proven to be a little biographical, but I think it's I might be worth a look. And if you are searching me, it's Mcintire because there's a very prolific author on Vendor that Vela name last name McIntyre with a Y. So if that helps you at all, yes, I'd like you to read it. I like your reaction. You hate it? Tell me. You like it? Tell me. Shameless plug done. Let's talk about Israel. I like to keep up on this subject because it's a constantly evolving story, especially given the fact that it's affecting the outcome of the election. So the other day, Chuck Schumer, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat, the highest-ranking Jewish elected official in the United States, last Thursday called for the Israeli government to hold an election, calling it the only way to determine Israel's path forward after its war with Hamas. Now, I'm not going to take too long to get off script to say that is regime change. He's calling for regime change. And we have to look at why.
Well, I have a lot of statistics on this in my head. Do you know that in the past 4 years, Israel's held 5 elections?
I knew it was a lot. I know it was 5.
So what the fuck is he talking about, dude? We don't even hold that many elections. Shut the fuck up, Schumer. Really? I mean, I hate that guy. He's ridiculous. But go ahead.
Steve, don't hold back. Tell me how you feel, okay? Come on.
Not with this bullshit, but keep going.
I know. No, I'm doing my best to remain calm too, because this is infuriating to me. Because you don't call on a sovereign nation like and try to do regime change like that. This is not banana republics. This is a country. It's supposed to be one of our biggest allies. So Schumer says, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel at a time when so many Israelis have lost their confidence in the vision and direction of their government. Schumer said, if there needs to be a fresh debate about the future of Israel after October 7th, in my opinion, that is best accomplished by holding an election. I have comments on that, but I'll hold them for a minute. Schumer's 40-minute remarks delivered from the Senate floor come as frustration with Israel's approach to its war with Hamas have reached a boiling point among U.S. leaders amid concerns over a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The New York Democrat acknowledged that the U.S. cannot dictate the outcome of an election. Interesting. They said that if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's current coalition remains in power after the war and continues to pursue dangerous and inflammatory policies, the U.S. will have no choice but to play a more active role in shaping Israeli policy. All right, I'm going to stop for a second here and go back. Here's my thoughts about that segment of the speech. Okay, a fresh debate about the future of Israel after October 7th, in my opinion, that's by holding an election. We don't determine when Israel holds elections. Okay, we don't. So then you look at how he talks about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Yes, that is a real thing. Okay, there is a humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza, but that is caused by Hamas. That is the policy that we keep harping on about the fact that Israel has been forced to attack civilian targets in order to eradicate military targets because they're cowardly hiding citizens underneath military targets, underneath civilian targets. This is something that they cannot do anything about. So good for Chuck for acknowledging that the U.S. can't dictate the outcome of an election. But let's face it, he's trying to dictate the outcome of an election. And if the coalition remains in power after the war, well, let's talk about that for a second. It will remain in power after the war. But the war isn't over until Hamas is eradicated. And Benjamin Netanyahu has been very clear about that. Okay, so there's no indication he's going to continue to pursue dangerous inflammatory policies. The fact is that if they achieve their objective, and it remains to be seen if they will, because he's under a lot of pressure to do a ceasefire, which is, in other words, being asked to stand down. If he's able to eradicate Hamas and declare Israel safe, then that will stop. Israel has always said if the Palestinians put down their weapons, there'll be peace. Well, that's not going to happen. And if it does, well, then we'll see what happens. You have to see that through. But then we say we have no choice but to play a more active role in shaping Israeli policy. We don't have any role in shaping Israeli policy unless you want to cut them off from funding, which we should never do because Israel helps us an awful lot in other matters in the Middle East. So Schumer's been a staunch supporter.
The scary thing is that he's saying the terrible thing out loud. I mean, we claim as a U.S. government that we do not want regime change. We don't pursue that. Yet he's blatant. This is almost like the quid pro quo from Joe Biden, and that no one wants to see it or believe it. I mean, but it's being said. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. No, but thank you, Steve, because that's exactly what he's doing. He is calling for regime change. And that is something that, like you just said again, we don't do. Well, at least not publicly, and it's not in the papers. He has been too willing. I'm sorry, Schumer has been a staunch supporter of Israel, says he. Called Netanyahu a major obstacle to peace, saying he has all too frequently bowed to the demands of extremists. He said Netanyahu has lost his way by allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel. He's been too willing to tolerate the civilian toll in Gaza, which is pushing support for Israel worldwide to historic lows. Israel cannot survive and becomes a pariah. Well, okay, yes, Israel is a pariah because they are doing what they have to do. They're not listening to world opinion. They're doing exactly what they said they would do. And they're not going to stop until they've achieved their objective, because there's no point in stopping, because everything will be lost if they don't eradicate the threat, because it will just be a number of October 7th over and over and over again. I mean, I don't know why people don't see this. It's harsh. I'm not advocating for this. Well, let's call it what it is. It is a horrible situation, and a lot of people are dying. I don't love that. Of course not. But I don't see any other way he can do it. Now, this man, my final thought in this segment is that Netanyahu is protecting the Israeli people as he's been entrusted to as their elected leader. Okay, this is the same thing that we're asking our own president to do.
And he
We don't have a
refused it.
we don't have a foreign enemy necessarily right now, lobbing bombs at us, but we have an invasion going on our southern border that we have yet to see what the ramifications are going to be. We don't know if there's going to be terrorist acts from that. What are these thousands of Chinese military age males crossing the border up to? What is going to happen due to our disastrous border policies? Netanyahu is unabashedly saying to the Israeli people and the world, I am going to protect you regardless of how people feel about it. And I'm not going to say I'm in love with, or I'm in bed with Netanyahu, but he's done exactly what he said he would do. So, Schumer is just so out of line. That's my real takeaway. He's so out of line. Now, Biden administration has supposedly advocated for a two-state solution, which would create an independent state for Palestinians alongside Israel. And as at present, Gaza is a Palestinian enclave within Israel. We tried this two-state solution. This story is really, it's very simple, okay? The world has grown tired of this war. They're tired of the casualties. They're tired of the refugees. They're tired of the humanitarian situation going on. They're blaming Israel. Then they're blaming us for supporting Israel. It's affecting Biden's popularity, and he's worried about losing the election. And Schumer is just being a good lapdog, and he's out there trying to create some division that might send things in a way that might help Joe Biden's chance to getting elected. Tell me I'm wrong. Please, people, tell me I'm wrong.
Here's the ridiculousness of this, okay? I am very schooled on what's going on in Israel right now. I've been listening to a lot of stuff on it and reading. And what Israel has right now is what's called a war coalition, okay? Mm-hmm. That war coalition has in its realm, there's a person within that war coalition, right? That if Benjamin Netanyahu is voted out, he becomes president, okay? He's on the same page as Netanyahu. He's in the war coalition with Netanyahu. He wants to go into Rafah because my understanding is they have 4 Hamas battalions in there, and they're pretty much that's the rest of them. So they want to get rid of them. Okay, but the big thing that gets me on this, okay, telling that they need a clear plan. This is what's going on with America. We're telling Israel, you need a clear plan or we will not back you, okay? You just said it, Bill. Their clear plan is to eradicate Hamas. But here's the irony of that. What's the damn clear plan in Ukraine? Yet they're throwing billions of dollars over there. It's ridiculous. This subject's got me heated. And then we've got this Democrat country in the middle of hell. Let's be real. The Middle East, to me, is hell. We have been around for less than 300 years, and we disagree on issues, but there's no civil wars and killing like that in this country. Those countries we're talking about have been around for thousands of years.
Thousands of years of hostilities, hatred, and feuds.
Still the same thing. So what's that tell you? Why do we even think we can fix this? Thousands of years of something. It can't be fixed. These people They just think different than us, and they're not gonna. And then
we did that in the Balkans, Steve. We've done it in the Middle East. We've done it in. I mean, what? I mean,
but
even Ukraine is tribal.
Schumer's the one saying we need a clear plan, or we're not going to help them. We're going to cut off any funding to Israel.
Yeah.
Yet there's no. What's going on in Ukraine? Like what is the end goal in Ukraine?
They're losing.
No, we don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah,
so
no, I'm sorry, right? We don't have a plan. No,
yeah, but let's keep throwing hundreds of billions of dollars at them. But just because you might not get the votes out of Michigan, you're going to start freaking out right now and start supporting.
Steve, thank you. You just put it in terms that everybody can relate to. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This is about the election. Because we are totally about the election. Schumer's also contradicting a long-standing U.S. policy.
Yeah.
That we support Israel. We don't dictate to, but we support Israel. Well,
exactly.
Then keep giving them guns and keep giving them stuff on the Iron Dome until you decide that you don't want to. Whatever you have to do, Israel will still find a way to get it done. Okay, this is I think the arrogance is the word I'm looking for here, Steve. Does that sound about right? This is
but that's all these
arrogance.
Clowns. And both the Republican and the Democrat Party up in Congress. They're all arrogant.
America's superiority.
Yes.
Steve, great feedback. And I'm glad you fired up because people will feed off of that and maybe they'll look at this issue a little harder because this is clearly taking a very large issue with significance and making it a political issue. And this is not something that should be done.
Well, let's tell Chuck Schumer to shut the F up and move on.
Again, I've been doing that as long as I've been alive.
But we're going to move on here at the We Are Marshall podcast. Please hit that like, share, and subscribe on our Rumble channel or on any of our social media at YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Locals, X, Truth Social, and, of course, Rumble. Bill's been working real hard on our social media, so get out there, check it all out. He's got all these clips out there of many of our episodes. Check them out. Stories on Facebook, everything. Enjoy it.
Our YouTube catalog is fully updated.
Okay. Have we got censored yet? That's the question.
I haven't checked today.
I'll have to look. So we're going to move on to topic 3, and it's going to stick with my theme that I'm doing, which is the First Amendment and freedom of speech. In the first story, we clearly saw that was a problem. Google was suppressing that. Now, this story should make every single one of you, and I'm sorry for the language, this podcast, pissed off. Okay?
Yes.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She is a Supreme Court justice, just got voted in by Biden. So here we go. She raises eyebrows with comment that First Amendment hamstrings government. Oh my goodness, it's supposed to. In a debate Monday at the Supreme Court challenging the Biden administration's alleged coordination with big tech to censor certain messages. See, Biden with Google now, Biden with Facebook, Biden with big tech. It's just a theme, the Democrats and big tech, but with big tech to censor certain messages. One justice raised eyebrows in her comments about the government's relationship with the First Amendment. Relationship? It's the Constitution. It's not a relationship. Oh, my God. The case stems from a lawsuit brought by Republican-led states, Missouri and Louisiana, that accused high-ranking government officials of working with giant social media companies under the guise of combating misinformation. That ultimately led to censoring speech on topics that included Hunter Biden's laptop, COVID-19 origins, and the efficacy of face masks, which are all very important issues, which the states argued was a First Amendment violation. In nearly 2 hours of oral arguments, the justices debated whether the Biden administration crossed the constitutional line and whether its outreach efforts with private companies amounted to permissible persuasion or encouragement versus illegal coercion or threats of retaliation. Quote, it's got these big clubs available to it. And so it's treating Facebook and these other platforms like they're subordinates, Justice Samuel Alito said. But Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson took a different approach. Quote, your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the federal government in significant ways in the most important time periods, she told the lawyer representing Louisiana, Missouri, and private plaintiffs. The government actually has a duty to take steps to protect the citizens of this country. I mean, how can you say that? Joe Biden is not protecting us. Look at the border. But anyway, by encouraging or even pressuring platforms to take down harmful information, she said. Justice Jackson appears to be saying that she believes that the state's view would prevent the government from explaining its facts or positions to the social media companies when there is some danger or imminent threat. John Shue, a constitutional attorney who served in both Bush administrations, told Fox News Digital, noting that the heart of the case revolves around where the differentiating line between persuasion and coercion exists. So to me, it looks
That's
like
it
we're
right
going to
there.
get
That
once
line.
again with the Democrats. The definition of the word is. The
Yep.
First Amendment does not prevent government officials from complaining about a particular post or explaining why the post is factually incorrect. In fact, that's why X has the community notes function, he said. However, Chu noted that the First Amendment prevents government officials from coercing, whether explicitly or implicitly, publishers to remove posts or articles because the government disagrees with or doesn't like that viewpoint, even if it is under the guise of national security or public health. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey told Fox News Digital in an interview that Justice Jackson was absolutely right. That's an Attorney General of Missouri. It is hamstringing, and it's supposed to. Thank you. The whole purpose of the Constitution is to protect us from the government. Thank you. And the government exists to protect our rights. Thank you. But here the federal government is ignoring our First Amendment protections and weaponizing the federal government to silence our voices, Bailey said. And she's right. It limits what the federal government can and can't do. And that's a good thing, he added. The lawsuit from the states alleges 67 federal agencies and officials coerced platforms like Facebook and Twitter X to censor individual posts primarily related to COVID-19 restrictions imposed by the past two administrations, as well as the 2020 presidential election results. Those cited include White House communication staffers, the Surgeon General, the FBI, and the U.S. Cybersecurity Agency. In a July 4th court order last year, U.S. District Court Judge Terry A. Doughty imposed a temporary injunction preventing White House and executive agency officials from meeting with tech companies about moderating content, arguing that such actions in the past were likely First Amendment violations. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals extended the scope of the injunction and said officials could not coerce or significantly encourage changes in online content. In its appeal to the Supreme Court, the Justice Department argued that a central dimension of presidential power is the use of the office's bully pulpit to seek to persuade Americans and American companies to act in ways that the president believes would advance the public interest. That includes areas like public health, voting integrity, and national security threats. In Monday's oral arguments, conservative justices were most vocal against the federal government when the appeal first arrived at the High Court, said was heavy-handed tactics to skew the presentation of views on the medium that increasingly dominates the dissemination of news. Justice Clarence Thomas suggested how the federal government might subtly coordinate with tech firms. You just work together. Said, look, we're right. They're wrong. Let's work together. We're on the same team. Let's work together to make sure that this misinformation doesn't gain sort of any following. But several of their conservative colleagues were concerned about hamstringing the federal government too severely. One hypothetical raised in court was how to respond to an epidemic sprouting online in which young people were being encouraged as a dare or stunt to record themselves jumping from windows to the ground below at ever increasing heights. The government is not monolithic either, said Chief Justice John Roberts, using another hypothetical. Maybe EPA is trying to coerce a platform about something, and the Army Corps of Engineers is trying to coerce them the other way. I mean, you can't just sort of pick and choose which part of the government you are concerned about. When the lawyer for the plaintiffs argued the federal government was indirectly engaging in encouragement with platforms, Justice Amy Coney Barrett interjected. Just plain vanilla encouragement? Or does it have to be some kind of significant encouragement? Because encouragement would sweep in an awful lot. Justice Elena Kagan raised national security concerns. Terrorists engage in things that come under the First Amendment. Let's say they're just recruiting people for their organizations online, she asked. There's all kinds of things that can appear on these platforms that do all kinds of different harms. And the inability of government that you're suggesting to reach out to these platforms and say, we want to give you information that you might not know about on this. Jenin Yoon's counsel for the new Civil Liberties Alliance, who represented private individuals in the case, said they were optimistic. Our clients, who include top doctors and scientists, were censored for social media posts that turned out to be factually accurate, depriving the public of valuable perspectives during a public health crisis, Yoon said. We are optimistic that the majority will look at the record and recognize that this was a sprawling government censorship enterprise without precedent in this country, and that this cannot be permitted to continue if the First Amendment is to survive. Now, I can't agree with that last paragraph anymore. The bottom line, it says no coercion, no anything like that with these companies. Well, let's be realistic. I don't care what anybody says on this subject. What all those entities did was they had meetings, the FBI involved, they scared them. They used tactics to coerce them, to remove things, to suppress things. It is a fact. They violated the constitutional First Amendment. Our government did, and so did many other agencies, and something better be done. A person that I listen to on a podcast all the time, I will not mention, Bill knows who I'm speaking of, did mention this case, and he had no optimism about the case. He actually said that he feels it's going in the wrong direction. But I got to tell you, if we lose this case, if we lose this against the government, George Orwell was talking about child's play to what's about to come down the road. So pay attention, my friends. Bill, what do you have to say about all this?
Well, if you want to reference famous authors, I'd say Aldous Huxley would have an even more harsh view of Orwell, despite the fact that Orwell was about as prophetic as could possibly be when he wrote 1984. As was Ayn Rand, by the way, in 1955 when she released Atlas Shrugged. That book is getting more relevant every single day. Look, there's nothing more difficult than a free society, okay? Countries around the world that don't have free speech or some notion of free speech or don't have a police state anyways, I guess that's where I'll make the benchmark, have it a lot easier than we do. There's nothing more difficult than protecting free speech and maintaining it and sorting it into what's manageable and what's incendiary. And they put out examples such as you can't yell fire in a movie theater. You can't say...
It's not even a law.
Right. You can't even do what Maxine Waters got away with by calling for violence against Trump supporters in the middle of a war-ravaged district about 5 years ago.
Telling people to go bother them at their restaurants when they're eating with their families and whatnot.
That wasn't incendiary, and if someone got hurt, she wouldn't have been responsible for anything, right? No, of course not.
She wouldn't have.
Right, but the fact is that free speech has its downside. The downside is that bad people can get away with a lot of things, and big companies and big entities like governments and companies can do a lot to work around it and present things as they really aren't, if you will. But we also have a presumption on the free speech, which people were generally a little more intelligent, educated when we came up with our system, that people have an obligation to have the means, to have the ability, the wherewithal, and then the desire to seek the truth. Okay, and which the internet makes that difficult because a lot of things can be put out there and make it look like it's truthful. Not everybody is like the Onion, where they tell you, straight out that we're a satire. That people don't necessarily know what's true and what isn't. That's difficult. But I mean, what you read, you need to understand what you're reading. Jonathan Swift, in 1729, I think it was, released a modest proposal in which he suggested that the solution to the poor was eating the children. Well, there were probably a few idiots out there who thought he was being serious. Again, you have to take what you're looking at and understand what you're talking about. And this case is much more complex. I mean, there's so much to talk about here because we're talking about media outlets. We're talking about massive technology that certainly escapes me. Some very intelligent people on the Supreme Court discussing this issue, and then a couple of not so intelligent people on the Supreme Court. Elena Kagan and Ketanji Jackson Brown. These two, when they were nominated, I said, "Oh my God, we need to get a Republican in office," and that's why I voted for Donald Trump, the Supreme Court. People like these two is what I was afraid of. So this whole case, it's actually so much I can't rebut or confirm or discuss everything you covered so much. But the fact is that Ketanji Jackson, there's context, of course, in her statement. Okay, we do have to look at the context and nuance what she was saying, but the overall tone suggested that our free society and our free speech is getting in the way of the government helping
As it's
us.
supposed to. That was
Right.
what
Well,
our
yeah, I can't say you stole my punchline because you said it before I was going to say it. But yes, that's what I'm saying. That's the idea. It's not supposed to be easy. You have to find a way to find middle ground in which people acknowledge that something is not only there for a reason, but there's a huge reason why it's there. It's the brick that society is built upon, our society. And you're suggesting that is she suggesting that the government should be absolved of the
She's
First
suggesting
Amendment?
that the government should hold thrall over us, not us over them. That's the problem right there. But let's be real. A couple things I have to say to end this segment. The definition of freedom of speech is enabling those you disagree with to have a voice. Okay? It has nothing to do with incendiary. Okay? If I threaten you, I can be held liable for that.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
That's a law on the books with the police. They'll come and arrest you. Okay? So if you do that, there's a law. There's no need to do this. But the big thing is, here's the problem I have with freedom of speech the way they're approaching it, okay? And context, like you said, is very important. It's so important. But I know you've been paying attention to the news, Bill, and I'm going to say a word to you, and I know it's going to it's going to make you feel something. And it's the word bloodbath.
Oh, yeah. There's been a massive. Oh, yeah.
Donald Trump was in a speech in the last week, and he was speaking about the car industry and how China is now trying to build 2 gigantic plants in Mexico so that they can surpass tariffing, because then it's created in Mexico and comes over our border that way. Well, he had a message for President Xi saying, ain't happening. I will tariff you 100%.
100% every vehicle, yep.
Which I love. But in that, he said, because if I don't win the presidency, because Joe Biden pretty much, he's saying, don't give a shit about you people, there's going to be a bloodbath in the economic car industry. And the left ran with just the word bloodbath.
Right. They edited it. They left out, they only used the words, they quoted the words over and over. Every outlet was doing it. If I'm not reelected, it will be a bloodbath for the car industry.
Exactly. They took it out of
They
context.
Stopped that bloodbath. And they said, he's threatening. He's, like he's yelling fire in the theater is what he's doing, what they're saying, right?
But the best part was I watched that podcast guy, and he had a whole excerpt of a number of left talking heads using the phrase bloodbath on a number of issues. But it's okay then. So the bottom line is freedom of speech is, look, Trump can say bloodbath if he wants. And if you want to have freedom of speech true, then the media, shut the hell up and report it properly and show it what it is. Because you people in the media are complicit in utilization of the word bloodbath too. Ridiculous. But I'm done with that.
Double standards, though, Steve. That's a big part of the story. Yeah. Double standards.
We'll move on. We've got more Israel stuff. We'll hand this off to Bill. He's got a couple of segments going next, and then I'll end the podcast as we do. If you have any questions or issues, you can reach Bill at wearemarshallpodcast.com, and you can reach myself at steve@wearemarshallpodcast.com. Here at the wearemarshallpodcast.com, we do want input. So do email us or go to the website and start chatting with us, and we'll get into a lot of subjects with you. But go ahead, Bill, on your on the fourth topic here.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve, that was a very good job. That's a big topic, and you broke it down concisely. And people, seriously, we're not just talking about the news of the day. This is stuff that you need to be talking about. We're not trying to lecture anybody, but this is important stuff, okay? It really is. So the next subject on Israel is more along the lines of Schumer's comment or suggestion that Israel should hold elections. Netanyahu has something to say about that, and he addressed the Senate GOP today over Schumer's calls to hold new Israeli election. It was quite the exchange, actually. Benjamin Netanyahu addressed U.S. Republican senators. Now, remember, if you've heard from the first part of the story, he did not address Democrats. He wanted to speak to Republicans only. So he addressed the U.S. Republican senators via video link during their weekly policy lunch today. This comes amidst escalating tensions between the Prime Minister and the Biden administration. Notably, Mr. Netanyahu had also requested to speak with Senate Democrats, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had declined the invitation. So Netanyahu decided his efforts are best spent talking to Republicans only. The relationship between the Israeli government and the U.S. has been a long-standing bipartisan issue. As I said before, the government has had a stable U.S. policy that we support Israel. Okay, bottom line. And while Republicans have traditionally been staunch allies in supporting Israel in its campaign in Gaza, Democrats have expressed concerns about the ongoing conflict extensively. And recently, as we know, Schumer had called for new elections, saying that the current coalition no longer fits the needs of the country. Not his place to say. But as the situation continues to evolve, both sides grapple with different perspectives on how it's being handled. So in this geopolitical landscape, Netanyahu's address to Republican senators underscores the delicate balance between international relations and domestic politics. The speech by Schumer and the subsequent reactions highlight the multifaceted nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the impact on global democracy. So I don't have a lot on what was discussed. It's a late-breaking story. Just want to take a second here. I lost my link. Sorry about that. So I'm sorry, I lost that. I'm just going to branch off here and say I'm just going to do the rest of the story. Save some time anyways. We pretty much know what it was about. Netanyahu had called on the U.S. Senate to reject Schumer's suggestion to stand steadfast and allow for the fact that Israel is trying to minimize casualties and needs the United States support. I want to talk more about how Schumer rejected the request to talk to Democrats. As Benjamin Netanyahu spoke virtually to Republican senators today during a closed-door meeting, Schumer declined the request by Netanyahu to address the entire Senate Democratic caucus, adding that Senator Schumer made it clear that he does not think these discussions should happen in a partisan manner. That's not helpful to Israel. This is after he rejected a bipartisan discussion, mind you. And now he's rejecting the partisan part of it after he refused to be part of it. That's just ridiculous. But the split screen highlights that polarizing American views of Netanyahu and Israel's conduct in Gaza, which has led to cracks in what is once solid, rock-solid bipartisan support for Israeli government. Tensions are escalating between top Democratic leaders and of course, Netanyahu amid a growing and deadly war in the Middle East, as we know about. Schumer addressed questions about Netanyahu at his weekly press conference today, saying that the Israeli prime minister is only himself to blame for the cracks in U.S. solidarity with his government. Wow. When you make these issues partisan, you hurt the cause of Israel, Schumer told reporters, standing by his call last week for new elections in Israel. Schumer has drawn condemnation for Republicans for the speech in which he said Netanyahu has lost his way and put his own political interests above the survival of Israel. I gave this speech out of a real love for Israel, he said. So let's talk about the U.S. support of Israel, because Netanyahu actually called out several Democratic lawmakers when this conversation first started. He said, 80% of your people support us, so why are you calling me out? And then he mentioned his own support within his own country. Well, a very recent report, a Harvard-Harris poll reveals that 82% of Americans support Israel in its war against Hamas, with 68% saying they believe Israel is doing what it can to avoid civilian casualties. 82%. That's interesting, because we're being told how it's a borderline humanitarian issue and it's a genocide. That word was used many times. It's still being used by protesters. Not so much except for the squad, perhaps, in the government right now, but it's a very common theme. But yet they're saying that Schumer thinks he's speaking for everybody when he says that all Americans think that Israel is behaving in an inhumane and harsh manner. That's not backed up. So conducted from an online poll from 21st of February, but the latest Harvard-Harris monthly poll has showed steadfast support for Israel, even among the youngest demographic of registered voters in the U.S. 72% of 18 to 24-year-olds responded in favor of Israel over Hamas. That doesn't seem consistent with the protests we've been seeing on campuses, does it, Steve?
No, not at all. And I'm very surprised at the number of people in these protests.
Yeah, I am. I went through one the other day while driving. 67% of Americans think a ceasefire should only happen after all the hostages are released. That's Israel's stance. Now, many people don't realize they still have hostages from October 7th. And Hamas is removed from power as opposed to supporting an unconditional ceasefire that will leave everyone in place. This is exactly what I said in the first story. However, 53% of 18 to 24-year-olds expressed favor for an unconditional ceasefire. That's a little bit of a turd in the punch bowl, if you will. But then you say that another study done in late February, half of U.S. adults say that Israel's 15-week-old military campaign in Gaza has gone too far. Actually, it's more like 18 weeks now. A finding driven mainly by growing disapproval among Republicans and political independents, which is alarming, I guess, according to a new poll from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research. Broadly, the poll shows support for Israel and the Biden administration's handling of the situation being slightly further across the board. The poll shows that 31% of U.S. adults approve of Biden's handling of the conflict, including just 46% of Democrats. That is an earlier spike in support for Israel following Hamas attacks. But Netanyahu, as I said, has insisted that as many Israelis support his handling of the war effort. It's important to note that these opinions are based upon a very specific context and may not reflect overall support for Netanyahu in general as a leader. But Israeli society remains divided, and views on Netanyahu they vary differently across different segments of the population. But this is important. According to a recent opinion poll, 80% of Israelis believe that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should publicly accept responsibility for the failures that led to October 7th. So that's saying he had security issues in place that it shouldn't have even happened. So this sentiment is shared by almost 70% of those who voted for Netanyahu in the last year's election. And interestingly, only 8% of the general public think he should not take responsibility. And when it comes to assessing who's better suited to be prime minister, 49% of respondents picked National Unity Party leader Benny Gantz, while only 28%.
Who's in that war coalition that I just told you about?
Yes, right. While only 28% chose Netanyahu, with the rest remaining undecided. So this is an interesting story. I apologize for not having enough information on what Netanyahu's address was, but the importance of it is that he fired back, he made his case, and the numbers are out there, and it's pretty much what we thought it was. A couple of surprises there, and he clearly does not have the support at home that he claimed he does. But the story began with how our U.S. government is telling us that we should feel about Israel. Well, they're speaking for 20% of the people of this country. And I have a big problem with that.
Well, because they're speaking for the 20% just so that they can get those votes. That's what it's all about.
Actually 20% of votes. Right, exactly.
Yeah. So good stuff, Bill. We're going to move on here now to his segment, This Day in History. Go right ahead, sir.
Yeah. On this day in history, let's hold on a second. Actually, I'm sorry. It wasn't the Republican Party. It was that LBJ sends federal troops to Alabama to protect the Civil Rights March in 1965. That was the story I wanted to cover today. Okay. This is a big story. We talked about LBJ last week. Very, very interesting character, and he had a lot on his plate. He had a lot of goals, civil rights-wise, despite the fact that he had a clear political motivation behind them. But on March 20th, 1965, President Lyndon Johnson notifies Alabama's Governor George Wallace that he will use federal authority to call up the National Guard in order to supervise a planned civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery. Intimidation and discrimination had earlier prevented Selma's black population, over half the city, from registering and voting. On Sunday, March 7, 1965, a group of 600 demonstrators marched on the capital city of Montgomery to protest this disenfranchisement and the earlier killing of a black man, Jimmy Lee Jackson, by a state trooper. It was called Bloody Sunday. And brutal scenes that were later broadcast on television, state and local police attacked the marchers with billy clubs and tear gas. TV viewers far and wide were outraged by the images, and a protest march was organized just 2 days after Bloody Sunday by Martin Luther King Jr. He turned the marchers around, but rather than carry out the march without federal approval. So after an Alabama federal judge ruled on March 18th that a third march could go ahead, President Johnson and his advisors worked quickly to find a way to ensure the safety of both Dr. King and his demonstrators on their way from Selma to Montgomery. It became one of the largest civil rights marches in the country's history, and a very public feud between Wallace and LBJ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the most powerful obstacle in their way was, of course, Governor Wallace. He was a very outspoken segregationist, and he was very reluctant to spend any state funds on protecting the demonstrators. So I was at the promising Johnson and telephone calls recorded by the White House that he would call out the Alabama National Guard to maintain order. Wallace went on television and demanded that Johnson send in federal troops. Now, furious at this, Johnson told Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach to write a press release stating that because Wallace refused to use the 10,000 available guardsmen to preserve order, Johnson himself was calling the guard up and giving them all the support he felt necessary. And several days later, 50,000 marchers followed King some 54 miles under the watchful eyes of state and federal troops. They arrived safely in Montgomery on March 25th. They watched King deliver his famous "How long, not long" speech from the steps of the Capitol building. And the clash between Johnson and Wallace, it was very public and very significant clash, by the way, because it established LBJ as a guy who would not take any grief. And it was successful. Matter of fact, I watched a movie they called Path to War. It's an HBO special about LBJ and how Vietnam destroyed him. They spent a bit of time on this issue. And while it was a movie, it does match up with what's here in this story. Wallace was making a very much embarrassing Johnson. And Johnson spun it around and made it so Wallace had no choice but to publicly ask him for help. And it was a big victory for Johnson. It was a very major humiliation for Wallace. So, interesting story. We got to keep remember, folks.
I bet you, knowing the astuteness of the LBJ with politics, he probably set that up to make him have to need him.
LBJ is considered to be one of the most astute politicians ever. He really is. I mean,
he was good at politics, definitely. Yeah. But good stuff.
Vietnam ruined him, but he was a very smart dude.
Vietnam ruined a lot of people. He is not alone, so we know that. But good stuff today. I hope you guys learned a lot. And now we're at the end of the podcast where I always end it with a human interest story, technological breakthrough, or a healthcare breakthrough. Today, I have a human interest story on an athlete. Like I watched a video, I almost got it, but I didn't want to end the podcast with probably both of us with some tears in our eyes, Bill, because it was on the video
before.
But the video was, you wouldn't have been able to hold back, and I will go over it at the end. But in this story, former UFC heavyweight champ Mark Coleman saves parents from house fire, and fans raise $121,000 for hospital bills. So while visiting his childhood home, former UFC heavyweight champion and Hall of Famer Mark Coleman was woken up by his beloved dog, Hammer, at 4 a.m. as the house was being consumed with fire. Swapping his metaphorical championship belt for a cape, Coleman managed to run through the burning house and save his elderly parents before succumbing to smoke inhalation. Rushed to the hospital, he battled for his life until he was able to breathe on his own again 3 days later. I had to make a decision, Coleman said about the house fire from his hospital bed. And I'm telling you, this, what I'm reading right now, is what the video was, okay? And it was awful. He said, I had to make a decision, Coleman said about the house fire from his hospital bed. It was already horrible. I couldn't breathe. I'm the happiest man in the world. I swear to God, I'm so lucky. I can't believe my parents are alive, he said with tears in his eyes, after his daughters were allowed to see him for the first time. Tragically, Hammer perished in the fire, the same fate that almost befell Coleman, who suffered the worst from the smoke when he ran back in to try to rescue his beloved Rottweiler. The former champ's adult daughters, Mackenzie and Morgan, took unpaid leave to help Coleman recover, and they set up a GoFundMe to pay for his recovery and to help support his parents, who lost everything in the fire. At publishing time, $127,000 had been raised from friends, family, and fans alike. Yesterday, my dad was released from St. Vincent's Hospital in Toledo, where they thought he was stable enough to go home, Mackenzie wrote in a March 16th update. We were only home in Columbus for about an hour when he started to have numbness in his arms and chest pain. My sister Morgan and I rushed him back to the hospital, where they determined he has developed pneumonia. Despite all of this, he is still the same positive, spunky, spitfire self, just as I am sure you can imagine. He wants to thank you all for the support and love you have shown him and us during this extremely difficult time. For those who are interested, Mark Coleman was the UFC 10 and 11 tournament champion. and the organization's first ever heavyweight champion. At UFC 82, he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame for being the first competitor to use American freestyle wrestling to dominate his opponents, and showing martial artists around the world that if you can't defend yourself from being taken down to the mat, you stand no chance among the best fighters in the world. In
Round
the
and pound.
latest update, Coleman, frustrated but in good humor by his repeat hospitalization, said, "I got to get training, but they won't let me out of my bed." I mean, what a great story. I mean,
Yeah.
just to see this massive man. I mean, he's a big guy, and his two daughters come into the hospital room, and they hug him, and he just gets into that crying, and then knowing that he lost his dog. I mean,
Yeah.
knowing a guy like that Rottweiler probably meant everything to him, and it's just
Mhm.
terrible. And what a great man to risk his life to make sure his parents can go on. I hope they feel that he paid them back now for everything they've done for him.
Sure. How much money did they raise for him, Steve?
127,000.
That's unbelievable. See, that at least is a momentary reminder that there are still good people in the world.
There are. So I hope you liked all the stuff. I hope you learned something. And I hope that story at the end really made this podcast what you really want to get out of it. That to me, it was hard for me to deliver it. I'm sure you could feel it and hear it in my voice, but I got it out because that video I watched was really hard for me to get through. But thank you all for watching. We here at the We Are Marshall podcast, like we always say, my name is Stephen Marshall. This is my co-host, Bill McIntyre. We're just two guys discussing the issues of the day, laying out the facts of those issues, and giving you our opinion and view on those issues. We'd also love it here at the We Are Marshall podcast if you would like and share all of our episodes around your social media. We can be found on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Locals, X, Truth Social, and Rumble. Rumble is where we populate our full channel with season 1 and 2 of all of our episodes. So download the free app Rumble and search the We Are Marshall podcast.
We have a Facebook page also.
Yep, then subscribe and follow to get notification of new episodes and other endeavors by Bill and I. Check out our episodes on all these social media sites and share them to help us grow. We'd also love it if you would check out our website at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com. You can see a number of things Bill and I are working on the website. If you go to Bill's bio, you can click on a link to all his blog posts and check out Vella on Amazon, where Bill also writes episodic short stories for your viewing. Check out my 2 books currently for sale on Amazon, The Unforeseen Enemy and The Perception Therapist. I will be coming out in the next 30 days with another one called The Skies Over Terrorism, and both of the other 2 are available now. That one will be available soon. Also, check out our sponsors, Local Prints, New Hampshire. You can go to our website again at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com and click on the link to Local Prints, New Hampshire on the top left. They're a full-scale screen printing company in Hampstead, New Hampshire, and they are available for domestic and international printing. Go support them as they support us. Also, check out our large sponsor, MateConnector.com, a large dating website just like all the other big dating websites out there with all the features that the big players have in the dating sphere. But Mate Connector is much more inexpensive than any of them. If you have any questions or issues, as we stated before, you can reach both of us at the following emails: Bill at wearemarshallpodcast.com, and me, Steve, at wearemarshallpodcast.com. So we hope you learned a lot. I know I did, and I hope you had a good time.
So did
and
I.
we'll be soon. We'll be back soon with another podcast. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for watching.